When it comes to the MCU this past year, I think it's fair to say that this has been the year for mutants. X-Men 97 released to critical acclaim. Hell, critical acclaim may actually be an understatement here. It's the highest rated MCU project of all time. Couple that fantastic show with the release of Deadpool and Wolverine, a movie that celebrates and honors the legacy of the Fox movies, mostly the beautiful mixed bag that was their X-Men franchise. And it's clear that mutants are on quite a run right now. Oh, and Beast was in the Marvels for a second. I actually almost forgot about that. Hell, as I'm typing out this script, Cyclops, Colossus, and Jubilee were just announced for Fortnite. It isn't necessarily a secret at this point that the MCU has been in a bit of a decline recently. They even pointed it out themselves in Deadpool. The multiversal saga as a whole isn't totally landing or resonating with audiences nearly as much as the Infinity Saga did, and I think that's clear with the recent announcement of Doomsday and Secret Wars. No matter how you feel about Robert Downey Jr. as Dr. Doom, this move undeniably comes with just a tinge of desperation. With both Avengers movies coming out within the next 3 years, the multiversal saga is currently on a speed run to the end. The post-Secret Wars MCU will almost definitely look very different from what we've come to know and love, and it seems like a safe bet to say this post-multiverse phase is where mutants will totally shine. Avengers characters will likely take a back seat for a bit. Fox X-Men will mostly be wrapped up post-Secret Wars, and after 2 decades, the MCU finally has the opportunity to bring their very own mutants in. With this completely original X-Men franchise taking center stage for the first time, there is really one major question: who will be on the MCU X-Men team? Going into the MCU X-Men roster, I think this should be a big team. X-Men 97 had around 10 members, with some getting a lot more play than others. I don't think 10 members is necessarily possible for the first movie, but I think eventually it should be around 10 to 15 mutants making up the MCU X-Men, with some obviously being in more projects than others. With that being said, it is really hard to limit the X-Men to just 6 members at this point, so I'm gonna aim for anything less than 10. Even if it's 9, I'm considering that a win. I think this is still a lot, but it's much more doable in my eyes. There's a couple cuts that have to happen for this number, unfortunately, so bear with me. Also, I think it's important to mention, I don't think this has to be a X-Men origin story by any means. A lot of these characters should already be somewhat established in the world and should have been in the X-Men for a few years. At this point, the X-Men should be a known thing. Also important to mention that just because a mutant isn't on this list doesn't mean they aren't in the movie at all, but they may not really have a spot on the main team. They may just be teaching in the X-Mansion or have a throwaway line of dialogue about how they're out of town or something, and then maybe they get a solo project or show up at some point. First up, let's get the obvious ones out of the way. There are 3 characters that I think are so unbelievably important to the X-Men as a whole that they have to be here, and I really can't see a world where the MCU does anything without them. Professor X is the most obvious one. Next is a character that has been done so unbelievably dirty in past live-action adaptations, but really shined in X-Men 97 to the point it seemed like a total resurgence has begun with that character. Of course, I'm referring to Cyclops. I think James Marsden was fantastic casting for the character, but the X-Men movies just treated him terribly. Even when Ty Sheridan played him in the reboot, he wasn't treated that well, and it is long past time for us to get a great Cyclops. A Boy Scout type character that leads the X-Men, is an incredible strategist, and does really cool shit like this. If this character is truly done justice on the big screen, he is an immediate fan favorite. He is in the middle of a generational resurgence right now between X-Men 97, a new Fortnite skin, and Marvel vs. Capcom, where I could not go an hour without seeing this picture on any social media. Rightfully so, mad. It goes hard as fuck. But anyway, the third and final obvious no-brainer character is one that elevates Scott as a character, one that can add the romance aspect that has been lacking in recent superhero films, and of course I'm talking about Wolverine. I'm just kidding, relax. One dude out there with next to zero media literacy whatsoever just started typing a comment about how the X-Men would be woke if that happened. Anyway, obviously I'm talking about Jean Grey here. The heart of the X-Men team, a character that holds an unprecedented amount of power which comes alongside an unbelievably powerful will. A character that is truly kind, compassionate, and empathetic, yet has to hold back at nearly all times. For anyone who somehow doesn't know about Jean Grey, she is an incredibly strong telepath who also develops telekinetic powers and is eventually taken over by the Phoenix Force. This makes her infinitely more powerful, but also infinitely more terrifying. Hopefully, for the love of God, in the MCU we wait a while for a Dark Phoenix adaptation, and it's infinitely better than the last 2. We do not need yet another bad Dark Phoenix adaptation. In my world, her and Cyclops really make up the heart and soul of this team. Scott leads with Jean at his side. Charles Xavier, Scott Summers, and Jean Grey are the first 3 members of this team. These 3 are just quintessential to the X-Men, and I can't imagine a world where they don't appear. There is a character that has had an unbelievable year, going from relative obscurity to having 2 all-time appearances mere months apart.
The name's Gambit, mon ami. Remember it.
You already know who I'm talking about, Remy LeBeau himself, the Gambit. The fan-favorite character from both X-Men 97 and Deadpool and Wolverine. I can't go an hour without dropping a, you know how long I've been waiting for this? Whew, I'm gonna make a name for myself. Gambit is just so cool, man. I get the argument to start him off as a villain, but I just think he should be on the team here. I think he's earned it at this point. Maybe do flashbacks or a solo project or something showing his time as a villain, but I just want him to be a big player in the MCU X-Men right from the start. Visually, his powers look fucking awesome. Gambit has kinetic energy manipulation, allowing him to create and control kinetic energy, basically charging any object he wants and then exploding it. He is also an expert at card throwing, which, as you can imagine, pairs really well with that kinetic energy ability. In addition to that, he's highly trained in martial arts and an expert with a bow staff. His fighting style is cool as hell too. We can get some really cool fight scenes with the staff, cards, and literally anything around him that he just charges up. His powers and abilities are made for the big screen. I don't think we'll ever get a Gambit fight scene quite as bloody as Deadpool and Wolverine, but there is an infinite amount of potential in these fight scenes, especially when he's side by side with his fellow X-Men. I hate to say it because I truly loved him in the role, but I don't think Channing Tatum should be the mainline MCU Gambit. However, I think we could just take his suit. That suit is gorgeous. I'm so glad we're past the point of boring comic book movie suits and we really are getting these campy ass suits pulled into live action, and somehow it's working. Now, I am no Nando v movies. I'm not going to fan cast all these characters, but I do feel very strongly about a Gambit casting, so I'm just going to throw that in here. Austin Butler, dude. That is genuinely perfect. I think it's perfect. He's lean, one hell of an actor, and my god, can this man pull off a fun accent. He also brings some star power to this new X-Men team, which I think would be a major plus, and he'll get locked into doing the Gambit voice for years afterwards. Who doesn't want to see that? Just like with Scott and Jean, there is another character that practically has to be alongside Remy. This person completely elevates Remy as a character, and I think their romance is probably my favorite in all of comic book media. Of course, I'm talking about Wolverine. Just kidding, but I bet I got that guy again. He's already typing another comment. Who am I kidding? He left when I insinuated that the X-Men could possibly be woke. Obviously, I'm talking about Rogue here, another character who was done fairly dirty in the Fox X-Men universe, despite being played by Anna Paquin, who I think has a pretty good performance throughout those movies. As far as Rogue's power set goes, her mutation allows her to absorb memories, powers, personality traits, physical talents, and strength through skin-to-skin contact. Eventually, that is. At first, she is largely unable to control her abilities, and any contact could result in death. After a fight with Captain Marvel, she is able to drain her powers, giving her the abilities of flight and super strength. As I mentioned before, Gambit and Rogue are probably my favorite relationship in comics at this point, and they are two characters that I think will become immediate fan favorites on their own, but especially within their relationship. I think something that made X-Men 97 work so well is it treats the X-Men saga as a soap opera, and I think by having the MCU X-Men revolve around love, whether it's love between Scott and Jean, love between Gambit and Rogue, love between a professor and his students, or love between this found family, I think that is what will drive this movie. Rogue also introduces so many interesting concepts to this dynamic. Most of the mutants on the X-Men team don't necessarily love being mutants, but their powers aren't quite as terrible as Rogue. I'm reminded of the moment in X-Men The Last Stand where all the X-Men are talking about how terrible this mutant cure is, and Storm, who is practically a goddess thanks to her abilities, has the audacity to tell Rogue how terrible it would be to take the cure. Rogue, who literally cannot experience physical touch without possibly killing someone, the same Rogue who killed her boyfriend in an earlier movie. The audacity of Storm in this scene is just unreal. I think Rogue is a good addition to show that being a mutant is not all fun and games and flashy cool powers, but it comes with a lot of heartache. And with Rogue, there also comes the ability to tie in Captain Marvel in some way, most likely off-screen, but still an interesting connection that can tie this movie into the greater MCU without just making Robert Downey Jr. play Magneto. On top of everything, Rogue just fucking rocks. She's such a cool character, has a fun relationship with another member of the team, and is an absolute powerhouse. Again, I'm really not a fan caster here, and I'm not going to keep doing this, but I'd love to see Elizabeth Gillies play this character. I've thought that for a couple years now. I think she'd be great. One last note on Gambit and Rogue. I think they should totally get a fun little romance spin-off movie. Please. Not sure if I've said these words at any point throughout this video, but this next character was also done a little bit dirty by Fox. I know, what a concept. Elliot Page puts on a great performance, but Kitty Pryde absolutely deserves better as a character, and I think this is her time to shine. A big nerd with cool phasing powers, and sometimes even a cute little dragon, I think she's a perfect addition to this team. And Lockheed is a merchandising draw to Marvel. I just know it. I can see this little guy being sold in Disney World right next to the millions of Groots and Grogus. Anyway, Kitty Pryde is not just a cool character I'd love to see more of in live action, she could be a brand new member of this team as well, providing us with the fish out of water introduction to the team. A lot like Wolverine in the original X-Men. Plus, Kitty Pryde is a major part of some huge event stories that I would love to see the MCU tackle at some point, mostly a more comic accurate Days of Future Past. To be clear, that makes it sound like I have something against that movie. I absolutely adore that movie. It's one of my favorite comic book movies. It's just really not comic accurate at all, but I think the MCU doing a Kitty Pryde centric Days of Future Past would be awesome. I think she also has some really fun dynamics with other mutants, which would be really fun to see represented on the big screen. And I think having a younger, newer X-Men member on this team is basically a must. Another quintessential X-Men that has to be here is Storm. I was debating sidelining her for a bit since she has been around so much, but I just genuinely can't imagine an X-Men team without her on it. She is just necessary, I think. If you're somehow unfamiliar with Storm until clicking on this video, she has the power of weather manipulation and is ridiculously strong. I mean, look at what she was able to do in X-Men 97. Like a few other characters here, her powers are made to be visually stunning, and these powers are just made for the big screen. Introducing her to this universe post-Secret Wars could also allow for her relationship with T'Challa on the big screen, as I imagine we'll get a bit of a light reboot after Secret Wars. I think of Storm as kind of the big sister of the team, and I think her relationship with characters like Jean Grey and the new Kitty Pryde will be really wholesome. And she's already a fan-favorite character who is known to the general audience, at least in my experience. In my personal opinion, those characters are the must-haves, and the roster could end there, and I think it'd be fantastic, but I think 2 more characters should really round out this team. Yes, this does push the roster up to 9, which can feel overstuffed for sure, but I don't think all 9 of these characters need a ton of screen time in the first movie, but I would like for them to make up the roster of the team. If the list stopped here and these 7 were the first in the X-Men movie, that's gorgeous, I am thrilled, but if these next 2 are also there, I'm over the moon. But they could totally join in a later project, be post-credit teases, or just be referenced at some point, and I'll take it. Anyway, I'm yapping because I really feel like 9 characters is pushing it, but I don't care, man. I think it's fair enough. Anyway, before we get to that, here's some of the honorable mentions of characters I really wanted to squeeze onto this list, but I couldn't justify. If Morph joined the MCU X-Men roster, I would be over the moon. I think the new version of this character post X-Men 97 is so cool, and there is a ton of potential with them on the big screen. Something 97 did that was really fun was using Morph to sneak in cameos from other mutants and Marvel characters, and I think that would be really cool to see on the big screen as well. Have Morph turn into Hulk real quick to fight somebody, or turn into Angel to fly away. I think a lot of people would love to see that, me included, and they are just such a fun character. I know people are going to hate Beast not being on this roster, and I can completely understand that. He is an original team member and absolutely deserves a spot. I just think I would be happy to see him in the lab at the X-Mansion as opposed to being on the main team in the first movie, if that makes any sense. Beast has been done a lot, and I wouldn't mind seeing him take a backseat for a movie or 2. Speaking of characters taking a backseat, this is potentially my hottest take here, but I think it'd be good if Wolverine sat this movie out. Everybody loves Wolverine, everybody knows Wolverine, how could you not at this point? But I think the X-Men really need to shine without him. He stole the show in practically every X-Men movie. Let them cook without him for a little bit, tease him in a post-credits, people will go crazy. Finally, another mutant I would love to see but just can't justify pushing this up to 10 members is Nightcrawler. I would love to see him, and he was actually on this list up until the last second, but I did swap him out for a different character. Mostly to diversify the team from the X-Men 97 roster a little more, but I would love to see him at some point. Alright, I would like to see another original X-Men member on this team, and that is Iceman. I did swap Nightcrawler and Iceman. I think it just makes more sense for the first movie. Bobby Drake is a founding member of the X-Men, and his power set is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. He is a man made of ice. Unlike a lot of characters on this list, I think he actually had a pretty good run in the Fox X-Men movies, which is one of the reasons I wasn't going to put him on this list, but I think this is one of the final touches that this team really needs to feel like the X-Men, for me personally at least. He could be another younger member, and he provides a lot of interesting storytelling. A class clown type character with major daddy issues and insecurity coming from that father-son relationship. He's also ridiculously strong and an openly gay man superhero, which would provide some really cool opportunities if Disney feels like they're able to cut around any of his possible romance scenes to sell the movie in other countries. Not to mention his powers just look so cool on the big screen. The final member, the moment we have all been waiting for, drum roll please. The final member is really anybody. Okay, I do have a choice here, obviously, but when it comes down to it, I think all the previous members make up a pretty fantastic roster, and this pick here is really more so about throwing in a fun bonus. I think the choice that makes the most sense for me personally is Magic. Magic is just fucking awesome. Her mutant ability allows her to step through portals and teleport, but there is so much more to her character than that, to the point where it could actually be confusing to general audiences. In addition to being a mutant, she is also a sorceress and occasionally the demon queen of Limbo, which is a little more complicated than hell, but just for the sake of this video, think of it as hell. On top of that, she wields the magical soul sword, a sword that is tied to her life energy and allows her to decimate supernatural creatures. This sword also grants her some really cool looking armor. As previously mentioned, she is a sorcerer also, so she's able to do all the fun, cool little magic things, no pun intended. And on top of all of that, she has another form known as Darkchild, which is basically her demon form. I'm not going to act like Magic is some super niche character, but to the general audience, she really is. She has gained some popularity in recent years, largely thanks to video games such as Midnight Suns and the upcoming Marvel Rivals, but she is still a bit more niche than most of the other characters on this list. She did have a film appearance in The New Mutants, a rough movie overall, but I think she's the highlight of it. She is played by Anya Taylor-Joy, who really shines throughout the film. For some reason, they did make Magic racist. There's no need to carry that over, but I do think getting Anya Taylor-Joy here is a no-brainer. She is the perfect Magic casting. She is undeniably one of the more up-and-coming young actors in Hollywood, and she brings a certain star power to this movie that would be great. Plus, no one saw New Mutants anyway, so it's not like there would be any confusion over why she's here. And I cannot emphasize this enough, you cannot get Robert Downey Jr. to play another MCU character and then tell me Anya Taylor-Joy can't reprise her role as Magic. We are way past that. There is a lot that you can change on this list, and I would completely understand. Gambit and Rogue would probably work better as additions in later movies, maybe replacing them with characters like Beast or Wolverine, and maybe have them be minor antagonists at some point throughout the X-Men saga, but I just very selfishly want to see them now. I absolutely understand subbing them out though. I had a lot of fun putting this video together. I have been so mutant focused ever since Deadpool and Wolverine and just kind of had to put my thoughts out here. This video is hopefully kind of my reintroduction to long form content, something I really want to try and focus on in upcoming months, so genuinely thank you so much for watching this. It really does mean the world to me. If you enjoyed, feel free to leave a like or subscribe, or don't. I just appreciate you watching at the end of the day. Whether or not you enjoyed, I would love if you left a comment with your thoughts, who you'd sub out, or whatever else you have to say. I really can't emphasize how much you watching to this point means to me. It really does mean the world. Now we just have to wait like 6 years to see who I got right. It would be monumental if I somehow went 0 for 9 and not even Professor X is on the team. But anyway, enough yapping. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an incredible day or night, and I really do appreciate you.